today I want to cover, so you've already maybe have your own perception of what project data analytics is. I'm going to explain in detail and introduce us all to the concept, give a bit of inspiration for why we must do something about it, why it's so important. I'm going to show the impact on our organization. I'm going to talk about what greatness looks like, and why it's not all about the tech. Okay, it's not all about just learning how to use Python and Power BI. It's much more than that as well. And then I'm also going to give you some hints around starting your journey. So we start off with what is project data analytics. And this is a slide that I've presented many times before, certainly our meetup events, to really kind of articulate what project data analytics is in a slide. So if you imagine all the program information from Crossrail is separated into two buckets. So we've got the program control information, and we've also got the program technical information. Now, the technical information is fine. We're not going to worry about that. That is great data and information that's collected on the project. But the control information, all the stuff there in the blue box, so the procurement, the HR, all the schedules, all the costs, all the change control, risk management, all the financial control, legal, etc. When a project is finished, this is best case archived, worst case deleted, removed, and not used on future projects. And we call this the exhaust plume from project delivery. And what we really want to do with project data analytics is leverage our experience from our portfolio to really change the dial and improve project delivery performance.
Look at possible B&Bs in Ramsey and see the prices.
Again, bit of feedback. I think it's from Alan there. If you wouldn't mind just muting, that'd be great. So project data analytics is the process of extracting, examining, transforming, arranging data to extract useful information and insights. And I'm going to talk a bit more about what project data analytics isn't on the next slide. And I've just got a bit of feedback now from Andrew Hudson, if you wouldn't mind just muting Andrew. I'm going to mute you, not a problem. And
headphones, I can't really hear.
Alan, you're just not muted, just muted you. You wouldn't mind just making sure everyone's muted, just because it's just ever so slightly disruptive. So thanks everyone for that. So on the right hand side, I've got the Gartner value escalator. This is a really easy way for most people to classify not only themselves and their own skills, but also their organization. So it describes everything from descriptive analytics, so what happened, all the way through to prescriptive analytics, which is a step even kind of beyond machine learning, where you're looking at how we can make something happen. And it's a plot really of difficulty versus value, and it might not necessarily be linear, but this is good enough for an approximation. And we're going to talk more about that chart later on this afternoon. So project data analytics is not just dashboards. It extends way beyond that. Too many dashboards, or I think it was in the feedback, someone said too much reporting. Dashboard overload is a genuine problem. People are suffering. They think that bolting dashboards onto third-party data that they've been collecting or their own data is the solution to data analytics, and it really isn't. There is so much more around making sure you're solving the right problems and you're collecting the right data, and you've got clean data, and you sort out all the behaviors and cultures and everything, and you're even more important than that, maybe your data architecture and ensuring you've got the right foundations in place and it's scalable. It is not just about using Power BI or Tableau or Domo or whatever your visualization software is and building reports on top of the data you've got and seeing what you can find in the data. That is really what the community and what the company, is fighting against. So a bit of inspiration. I think we know that projects are inherently difficult to predict and sometimes unsuccessful, but let's have a look at some of the evidence. So I am, full disclosure, I'm completely piggybacking on some of the research done by Side Business School at Oxford by Ben Flubier and Alex Budzier. So they've got a really big portfolio of projects, and this is just some of the statistics that they reported quite recently. So from a 0.5% chance from all the projects that they have, which is nearly 12,000, that a project is going to be delivered on time, on budget, and or on benefits or better, which is shocking. 1 in 200 projects is just not good enough. And really, the kind of worrying thing is that this hasn't changed much in the last 20 years, and data is the only way we can really move the dial on some of these statistics. An organisation, Bride and Wood, they've developed a system that can interpret and process the logic required for motorway design, and it takes into account things like junctions, bridges, inclines, hills, etc. So if we can do this with a road, and projects are very, very process focused, then why can't we do this with a project? And that's what we've really kind of striving to do within the community. Predisposition. Now, we know that people are predisposed to illnesses. I am predisposed to sciatica because the discs in my spine are too close together. But does the same thing apply to a project? A lot of people claim that a project is a once through process, and they're completely unique, and there's actually no there's no correlation between previous projects, and I think that is just simply untrue. If you look again, big thanks to Ben Flubier and Alex Fudzier for piggybacking off more of their brilliant research. You look at the mean cost overrun and mean schedule overrun, and I'll highlight those two. Brace yourself for a very poorly drawn circle here. So these two columns are the ones that are important here. The mean cost overrun, the one on the left, you can see that if we were building something in nuclear power or Olympics or dams or IT or buildings, there's a pretty good chance you could guarantee that the project's going to overrun in terms of budget. And then the column on the right hand side, the mean schedule overrun, let's pick out some of the big ones. So nuclear power, 65%, IT, 47%, road, 38%. All of these projects, given a new one, there's a good chance it's going to overrun in terms of schedule. Now, this doesn't tell us why this is happening. We've got no causality here. This is where we need to connect data together. We need to connect this kind of information with work breakdown structure, conditions, the value, the team, and try and understand what is happening behind these, these high level statistics. So there is definitely predisposition. Now, there are quite a few companies already that are, it was white space a couple of years ago, but there are quite a few companies kind of cropping up in this project data analytics space. One of them is MPlan, and MPlan's kind of tagline is they're giving the next generation of risk assurance. So they're predicting the outcomes of construction projects to help their clients or their customers, understand complexity and risk. Dev, the CEO, has been to our meetup 3 or 4 times and provides a genuinely fascinating insight into what MPlan have been up to. So those are all recorded as well. Maybe if Sophie's still here, she'll be able to post a link to our YouTube site where you could go and watch some of those videos. And I'm sure Dev will be along to future community events as well. I'm sorry if you can hear my stomach grumbling. Hopefully my microphone's not good enough to pick that up. We've got us as well, Projecting Success, obviously sat in this space. We're not just a training provider. We're also a consultancy. That's the heart of the business. A project we worked on must be a couple of years ago, was in work winning. So we built a machine learning model to understand the likelihood of winning a particular contract. We managed to integrate a few different data sources like Barber, Glenigan, Contracts Finder, and a few others actually. And then it gave a contractor, you could input your information, input the tender information, and it would give you a likelihood of your success and even tell you who it thinks is going to win. And we managed to bump this to about 65% accuracy, which was we were really, really pleased with. Shark Tower, again, another company in this space, allows project managers to quickly search skills, availability, identify workload issues, etc. They were with us last year, so if this is interesting to you, then please, again, check out the YouTube page, and you can watch Shark Tower's presentation. A forecast, completely removing the need for human input at the planning stages of project management. So the algorithm understands things like your resource availability, it knows your resource constraints, and it lets the project manager really concentrate on adding value elsewhere in the project. So what about, so we've spoken about procurement a little bit, but how much is project data analytics really going to disrupt it? What about the client? How will their role evolve over the next few years? Now, we really see that clients are going to see projects as a pipeline of activity and move away from this kind of one-off idea that I think has really held us back for a number of years, and they're going to be much more strategic about it. I think data availability and creation will be baked into the contracts. They'll insist on end-to-end pipelines, building clean data that will help their next project. I think they'll really reward people working together and working collegially. And there'll also be adaptations to the MEET framework as well. So the most economically advantageous tender. It's a prioritization method that is about 7 years old now, maybe 8 years old. So I think this is really going to have to adapt and make sure that data is included inside of this. So as well, I think that's really going to be subject to a lot of change. Again, centralized versus federated, a really interesting topic, a discussion that I have with people a lot. Should we be having centralized data science teams, and then our project professionals go to them to do internal or external development? Or should we have data capability that's fed into our project professionals, so BIM, project controls, project managers, etc. Now, I don't think data scientists and bespoke teams will never disappear. Of course, they won't. But should we be completely denying project professionals these kinds of skills? Is that the best way about it? And I think right now, quite a few companies are really investing in these centralized teams, and they're building the governance in to restrict people in the company from building automation or reports or data pipelines. And they're letting the data science teams concentrate on the big strategic stuff, which means that the small things in the business aren't being done. So I think it's great they're concentrating on the big strategic stuff, but the members of staff in those data science teams aren't equipped to communicate with the project professionals. The project professionals aren't equipped to communicate with the data scientist teams, and they butt their heads together, and they're not really supporting them in their everyday tasks. So what I think we need to do, what the company thinks we need to do, and what the community is all about, is feeding data capability into the people on the ground, the project professionals, so that they can at the very least, communicate with the data science and data analytics teams, so that I think that they can actually run their projects successfully, and build the tools that those project professionals actually require. So I'm going to head back to Menti, so please engage again. It was really successful last time. We had a lot of uptake. So where are the PDA roles heading in your business? Are they mainly centralized? Are they mainly federated into project roles? Is it about 50-50, or is it too early to tell? This is, like I said, this is something that I discuss a lot with with our clients, our partners, learners as well, delegates on the hackathons. They've got gaining great new skills, but sometimes the governance is too restrictive. They can't deploy them because the companies really invest in this idea of kind of centralized data science, data analytics teams. So only 11% of people saying mainly centralized. Similar proportion saying federated into project roles, which is interesting. And about a fifth of people on the call saying 50-50. Only got 38 people responded, and there's over 100 people here. So please pick up your phone. Again, the code is at the top of the screen if you've lost it, 224942270. And just over the half the people think it's too early to tell. So I think it's worth giving this a lot of thought. I think this is going to be really, really impactful over the next few years around the way in which companies go. I really think that data analytics skills will be the new equivalent to learning the Office suite over the next few years, where we always used to put, fluent in Microsoft Word and PowerPoint and Excel. I think data analytics will be creeping its way into CVs in a very, very similar way. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. I'm going to jump back to my slide deck. So how will this impact your role? Now, always worrying when we've got so many project managers, project controls, professionals in the call, and then I go and pick on project management specifically. But I really do believe, and I don't mean to scare anyone, that data science and automation is going to chip away at project delivery roles. Now, I'm not saying people are going to be made redundant, but I think there's an opportunity here, and let's flip that into an opportunity for people to really start to shape this and influence the way in which this transition is going to take place. So on the left hand side, you can see I've got a bit of a job description, or I guess maybe a job spec from the APM for project management. And I'm just going to look at the first view here. So planning what work needs to be done and who's going to do it. So this is what forecasts do. This is what the company has set out to achieve. Looking at the risks involved in a particular project, and managing these risks. Again, this is what forecast and M-plan are setting out to do, and there are lots of other tools as well that are getting involved in this space. Making sure that work is done to the right standard. Again, this is something that's been broached by our hackathons. Again, I'll talk about those more later on, but building systems and tools to really understand if particular documents or pieces of work or tools or software are actually created to the correct standards. So it's a really interesting space because so many aspects of these tasks are going to be assisted, replaced by data analytics, and people really need to, I guess, bear that in mind and think, do they want to sit back and let this happen, or do they want to kind of get involved and be part of it? So a survey we had back in October last year on the 14th, we had a project data analytics panel session. We had 150 people on the call. Now, I know that it's not representative necessarily of the population, but we asked that group of people how they're using project data analytics today, back in October. And nearly 40% of them, so 38% of them, said they were only using pilots and experimentation. And these are from the people that are engaging, the people that are interested in this stuff. So it's pretty shocking, really. And 40% of people said they were using minor or inconsistent, so 21 plus 19. So some really quite surprising statistics. We also asked the same group of people how they envisage project controls evolving, and 72% said that there would be major change, or the role could be very, very different. So 23 plus the 29 there, which is again an overwhelming majority thinking that project controls is really going to go through quite a serious transformation over the next few years, very much like project management. So I'm going to jump back to Menti. So again, if you wouldn't mind just grabbing your phone or navigating back to that browser tab. I've just got a few more questions. So on this idea of roles, which roles do you think are going to be impacted the most? Is it going to be PMO, reporting roles, risk management, cost engineering, scheduling roles? Now we know what M-Plan are doing. General project management. Have I scared the project managers in the call into thinking that they are going to be impacted? Document controls, document controllers, I should say. We've got quite a few document controllers in our apprenticeship academy, and it's really transformed their role using things like Python and automation. It's not made them redundant, it's meant that they could become more efficient and add value elsewhere to the project. So PMO and reporting is very, very high. Risk management just about in second place there, joint with scheduling. Document control, very high. Usually when I run this kind of session, document control is not that high. General project management, sort of leaning towards significant impact. And the distribution of the data is very interesting as well. So relatively evenly distributed, but I'll certainly get into a lot more. PMO and reporting is way, way out in front. That's great, thank you. I'm going to jump back to my presentation deck. Sorry to get you to keep picking your phone up and down. So it's interesting that the audience does agree with that perception that kind of PMO reporting roles are going to be changed a lot more. I'm looking forward to kind of getting into the analysis. So I mentioned the Gartner value escalator at the beginning of the presentation. I said we would talk about it a little bit more this afternoon. Now, most organizations that we're dealing with are sat in descriptive analytics, possibly dipping their toes into diagnostic, but they aspire to be working with predictive and prescriptive analytics. But the reason they can't get there, the reason it's an aspiration and not a reality, is because of data foundations. They haven't got the right data pipelines, data architecture. They can't scale properly. All of their data is very, very siloed and segmented, which is my last point there, connections in data. Their alignment between the data and the use cases doesn't exist. I should have this flashing and huge. This is so important, that bullet point, that people really, really have a tendency to pick up data sets and see what insights can be gleaned and understood from that data, as opposed to writing down the problems they want to solve and then collecting the data to solve those problems. I think it's an issue that I've seen across multiple industries, and we really need to kind of flip it on its head and solve the problems we want to solve, not just see what issues can emerge from data. And we see it at our hackathon events a lot. People that are sat in the descriptive analytics space have data, but they come to us with the data, not with a problem, and then we try and devise a problem from the data, and it's completely backwards. Data volumes and quality, again, this links in well with not being able to connect data. So if you can't do joins and build up data volumes and improve the quality, then you definitely can't step into machine learning and therefore predictive analytics, certainly not prescriptive analytics. So what does greatness look like? I'm going to jump back to Menti. So what is your level of understanding and application for the following? So Power BI, Python, automation, apps and databases. So don't worry if you haven't, it doesn't matter if you haven't used things like Python or automation. Equally, if you're a ninja, that's not a problem. Hopefully I'll be able to cater for most people today. Databases is quite an unusual one for people to be involved in. You're either kind of working with SQL Server or whatever it might be on a daily basis, or you're not. Slightly different to things like Power BI, automation, apps, Python, etc. So databases is the highest one, which is which is really unusual. Usually Power BI and the visualization software is way higher. Some knowledge of Python as well, a little bit about automation, and Python being the lowest. So maybe I'll have a particular focus on Python, and I'll sort of step away from databases a bit. Thank you. That's really useful. Okay, so I'm going to jump back to my slides again. Thanks to everyone for engaging with those Menti questions. So this is a bit of a plug for Project Hack 10. It's on the 7th and 8th of August, which I believe is Saturday and Sunday. It's called Project Hack 10 because it's our 10th hackathon in the series. And just in case you have no idea what a hackathon is, it is a 2-day event, as you may have gathered, where we get challenges from the learners on our apprenticeship, from our partners, from our clients, and they bring real problems that their companies face every single day. They anonymize the data. We have a very strict process and regime that they go through in order to get the data into a suitable state to be shared with the community. And then they encourage people on the day to join that team. These are project professionals, data scientists, data engineers, data analysts, to help them work through those problems and solve them as best as they can over the course of 48 hours. Then they give a final pitch at the end, and judges decide the best solution to that problem. And then there is prize money as well, quite a lot of prize money last time. It's a great event. Like I said, if you want to know more about it, please come along to the masterclass, hackathon masterclass, end of this month. I forget exactly when it is, and really put your mind at rest. And what I'm going to do now is just talk through a few different hackathon use cases that have cropped up over the last maybe 2 or 3 years. So at Project Hack 7, we had some great dashboards created around health and safety. Also at Project Hack 9, the last hackathon, this really stepped its game up, and we looked at kind of built-in mental health into a lot of these dashboards. And the great thing is that we're scooping up all of these solutions, and this is in development and projecting success at the moment. And these are all going into what we're calling the solution center, and then we're going to democratize these dashboards, algorithms, automation solutions. All of it will be democratized to the community. So all of the development that and innovation that's happening will actually be utilized. Another example, this was a challenge set by Costain. They used this book called the Spons Cost Book, which I had never heard of, but it's a PDF book where they look up all the different costs, I guess material costs for, and looks like fixtures and fittings, etc. as well. It's actually a PDF document, an electronic document that they have to go and look items up, and I guess they have to put things into a spreadsheet. And this kind of original task, so a small kind of contained task, would take 40 minutes, but the team actually used Python, and I dropped into this team and I gave them a bit of coding advice and a bit of help as well. They managed to extract all of the information from the PDF document, turn it into tabular information, which allowed a report to be made, and essentially a tool for doing the same work, but in absolutely no time at all. So a task that would previously take 40 minutes took 5 minutes with the new tool that they created. Now, if this book is being used, across the industries and, within companies multiple times every week or every month, it doesn't take long to claw back that 2-day development time. So it's things like that. It's the small kind of cost savings that really can mount up quickly. Another project at Project Hack 9, using GPT-3. So this is a pre-trained deep learning machine learning model that's actually incredibly good at creating human-like text. So you feed it a paragraph of written text which it learns from, and then it spits out text as if it has been written by a human. And the team were attempting to generate stakeholder management communications using this algorithm, and we were given access to it. It's probably the most exciting part of machine learning in natural language processing right now. So the fact that we had access for our delegates was was a real scoop for the community and for the hackathon. And some of the outputs were absolutely fascinating, and we're really keen to explore other use cases and applications as well. Another example, Project Hack 7. So the company Jacobs, and there was a quote there from the head of business analytics. So you can read that while I waffle on this slide. But the team here used the XGBoost algorithm, and they got really good results. But they actually did feature analysis to find out which aspects of the project are really impacting the budget and the schedule variance the most. And they did a great job, and obviously really impressed the head of business intelligence and analytics, which was great to see. Project Hack 6, so a little bit further back in time, the team were working with some data from Baker Hughes, an EPC company. They were trying to use machine learning to update schedule estimates and identify areas of that were particularly predisposed to variance. So they wanted to predict activity duration variance and then understand which aspects of their planning are really causing a lot of time, and then go back and actually amend some of those. Because at the moment they track all of this information, but they don't make any changes to the plan, the future plans that they've made. And we got to work with Baker Hughes post hackathon and make some improvements to this, which was again really exciting work. So project data analytics tools. Now, I did say at the beginning it's not all about the tools, but they are obviously useful, and it includes all these things like open source modules in Python like scikit-learn, automation software, Power Automate being one of them, or UiPath or Automation Anywhere, databases like SQL Server or Neo4j, a graph database, visualization software like Tableau, Domo, Power BI, coding languages, Python, R, C++, etc. And the ability to make low-code apps, I think, is so useful, much more useful than developing apps for something like iOS or the Android store. And we're going to take a slightly closer look at some of the subsets of these, or a subset of these. So we're going to focus on Power BI, Python, Power Apps, and Power Automate, and just walk through a few different examples. Again, I can bring a bit of focus to the things that have come out of the Menti as well, like automation, Python, and Power Apps. So Python, in case you think it's you're thinking, why does James keep talking about a snake? It's actually a general purpose programming language. It's open source, free to use for any application. And Python, you can do so many things with it. You can build desktop applications, you can build websites. More recently, it's got really good at building and deploying machine learning models. You can use it for automation, you can build games. It's also really good at cleaning data using modules like pandas and NumPy. Also really good for data analysis as well. So I pose this problem. Imagine you had a bunch of files, say 89 files in this case, and these are Excel files that a colleague has been collecting on orders for a particular, say, client of yours. And every single day they dump one of these order files into a folder, but you want to do some analysis on it. There's a question that you want to solve that involves having a holistic view of this data. Now, you can solve this problem in many different ways. You can solve it using different tools, but Python is a very quick way to solve it. So hopefully you can see my Windows Explorer, and you can see Python running within Spider. Python is a language, but Spider is the application that I'm running in here. It's called an integrated developer environment. And I'm just going to show you some of these files. So 89 files in here you can see in the bottom left-hand corner. And each of these files, I'll just open one up. It will almost certainly open on the other screen. Bear with me. Always seems much slower when you've got 100 people watching you. Much slower. So just contains 9 rows of information and the headers. What we want to do is concatenate that all together into one holistic file. So I'm just going to run this piece of code here. Concat is actually open on the left hand side, and I'm just going to output it to this data folder. So I can run the code. It's going to spit out the name of each file, which slows down the running process. So it's spitting out the names on the right hand side. And then it's going to generate that new file here, orders concat, which I can try and open. Hopefully this won't take as long as the one of the sub files. And if this does eventually open, you can see it's just the concatenation of all those different files together. Then this could be easily ported into something like Power BI, and then the relevant analysis could be done. So just like that, just a few lines of code, it's so easy to concatenate files. Obviously, it can be taken a lot further than this as well. It doesn't have to be, all the column headers don't have to be the same. You can do additional calculations and generate new attributes. The data doesn't have to be Excel files. It can be things like monthly or weekly reports, CVs, site number trackers. Images can even be translated into structured data, videos, audio files. There is so much potential. And what you're actually building is you're building like a localized cleaning pipeline, transforming unstructured data into structured data. And this is something that we do that in a lot of detail with our learners. We make sure that, because it's a really useful application that saves people. It's very simple, but it saves people a lot of time, and it means they've got access to insights and data that they didn't previously have. Python's also used at our hackathons a lot. It's probably the most popular language that we see that people bring Python skills. If you're thinking about getting started in this space, I'd really recommend taking a look at Python. I think it's going to really sort of take so many industries by storm. But we actually use Python to speed up the operations of the hack as well. We create PowerPoints for each challenge. So there's always a challenge pack, so you get the data and you get the PowerPoint, which gives you a bit of a user story and gives you some context, tells you about the problem statement. And it's usually about 6 or 7 different slides that we actually get the challenge owners to fill in an electronic form. We collect that data, and then we have a template presentation. We use Python to pick up that information and drop it straight into a presentation. So we don't actually create any of those presentations. And I've got an example of that happening. So I've got the command prompt, and I'm just changing directory on the right hand side there, running a Python script, and you can just see an empty directory on the left. So it has to, it's using quite a few different packages. So it's going to GitHub and getting different repositories. And then in order to interact with those PowerPoint templates, so it's just going to take a template, take all the information that we've collected for quite a few different challenges, and then create and render those PowerPoint presentations to the point of where we just need to check them, but we can send them out to the community. So you can see it's done that in about 15 to 20 seconds, and we can just open the first one up, and you can see the quality of the PowerPoint that they're producing. So you can see quite a few pages there, 6 or 7 different pages, all produced completely automatically. Another application of Python. So this is something that we've we've done through the consultancy side of the business. So this is something that people are really interested in, but it's also something we did internally quite a few years ago as well. So we're using Python to web scrape the internet, take particular blogs or news articles that are interested to us, format them, and translate that information into an HTML template, or sometimes even a Word template, and then we can host that immediately on the website. So we haven't got somebody kind of trawling around different internet pages looking for relevant blogs or articles. We can just immediately pull them down using web scraping in Python, translate that data straight into an HTML template, and then we can host it on our website, or we can send it out to our community if we want. So it takes that kind of research time down to absolutely nothing, and then there are lots of different directions you can take it as well. So just another use case of Python there. So I'm going to move on and talk about data visualization. Now, I did have a bit of a pop at dashboards at the beginning, saying that the data analytics is much more than just dashboards and data visualization. But of course, it is very important. But it's something you should be working on, much later in your kind of journey to project data analytics greatness, because it's what the end user interacts with. So if you're putting rubbish into it, then you're going to get rubbish out of it. So you need to make sure that your architecture, data quality, volumes, etc. is all sorted, and then you're making sure you're solving the right problems, and then you use the data visualization and the dashboards to solve those problems. So Power BI is the dashboard of choice at the moment. It really has taken the market by storm. I think it's got more than sort of 90% adoption. It's really quite impressive. It's a great tool. It's very intuitive, and I should be able to show you some live demos later on if they don't go horrifically wrong. So there are two main elements to this. There's Power BI Desktop. So this is an application you can download it on your Windows machine. I'd recommend going to the player. It's not called the Play Store. Go to the Windows Store and download it from there, because then you get it's all automatically updated, etc. for you. So it's even better than going straight to Microsoft.com and downloading it from there. And then so that's the application where you actually do all the development of your dashboards. You kind of build it there, and then you can actually deploy it to the Power BI service, which is point 2 here. So this is where you kind of publish the dashboard. It means it's actually hosted in the cloud at that point on what they call the Power BI service, and you can share it with members of your team, for example. So a few different interesting things about Power BI. There's a couple of languages involved. There's DAX and Power Query. Now, DAX is a good language for, I guess I kind of think of DAX as a bit like Excel. I build additional columns or attributes, measures. I do calculations, and these can be anything from simple trimming of columns to complicated measures that have sort of 20 or 30 lines of DAX code in them. Power Query is another language. It's used on this sort of import side of Power BI. I can show both of these later on. So you can use it to build applied steps in when you load your data. So you might want to change data types. You might want to do you might want to calculate various statistics or remove columns or add columns. The same thing with rows, and it builds this pipeline or process of actions that will be completed every time the data is refreshed. And once it's in the service, published to the service, to the cloud, then all of those actions can just be implemented using the refresh functionality in Microsoft. And then you have, so it's really good for building actionable dashboards. Again, you need to have a focus on solving the right problems, not just doing exploratory data analysis and seeing what you can solve. But I think the reason that Power BI has become so popular is because of the connectors. It has such a vast array of connectors. It's not, and we should be getting away from connecting, Power BI reports to Excel files. So you don't want to have an Excel file emailed to you, you build a report from it and publish it to the service, because then it's not refreshing. You haven't got live data. And Power BI lets you connect to so many different databases, third-party sources, APIs very, very efficiently and effectively. And I can show you a demonstration of that in a couple of slides time. Also lets you run Python code within Power BI. So this is something we do with as part of the academy and the apprenticeship. We can run machine learning code inside of Power BI. And for anyone who knows about Python, you use pandas, and you can just read tables you've got in as data frames and then use them as you would using the pandas module. And you've got access to things like scikit-learn and matplotlib, so you can do plots, you can do machine learning. The example I've got here on the left is actually some IT projects where we applied a machine learning model to them to learn how those RAG ratings are created, and then provide a predicted RAG rating. So you can filter all the projects, all the incomplete projects by green. So these are the ones that a project manager has said, yep, these are all fine. But actually you can filter over the red predicted projects and say, well, these are the projects that actually the algorithm is saying are likely to go wrong at the end. And then you can really focus and say, well, okay, let's look at these 2 or 3 projects, with a bit of a magnifying glass and figure out what's going on. And I mentioned this idea of connectors. So this is where, Power BI can be so powerful, and you can work with real-time information. So I'm just going to grab a link from the slide deck. Bear with me. So I'm just going to take us to the coronavirus. So this is the health example I wanted to talk about. This is the coronavirus API page. This is what we call a Swagger page. They actually call it a developer's guide, but they're essentially exactly the same thing. This page is meant to teach you and show you how to use an API. And now it's quite extensive, and there are lots of different variables and aspects of the API that you could change in order to get the right information. And what we're actually going to try and do is we're going to pull down the new cases, the cumulative cases, the new deaths, and the cumulative deaths. And we could do this by processing and understanding this page, grabbing our API and then putting it into Postman. And Postman is a tool for interacting with APIs, understanding the data formats that come out, making sure we sort out any authentication if we're using things like passwords or usernames or access tokens. And you can see I've built my API here from the Swagger page. I've got various keys and filters in the structure over which area name I want to look at and what are the attributes that I actually want to pull down. And then I can run it. It sends the request, and I've got the JSON data here. Now, this is great, and I know that this has been authenticated properly, so I can just go ahead and take a copy of the API URL. I can open Power BI Desktop, and I can just go straight to get data. So I want to tell Power BI that I'm going to be using an API. Just bear with me. So I'm connecting to the web connector, entering the GET request into that web connector. It takes a little while, and obviously this is Power BI Desktop I'm using, and I mentioned Power Query before, and it's going to open what we call the Power Query editor. It's done that on my other screen, so just let it load properly, and then I'll drag it down so you can see it. So this is Power Query. You can see it's grabbing this web contents from the page that I've said. I can tell that I know that this is JSON information, because I've used it within Postman. I saw a hand go up then. Did someone want to ask me a particular question? Just feel free to come off mute or stick it in the chat. It's not a problem. And I'm just going to open that data. We've got all the records in there. I'm just going to convert this to a table. I'm happy with setting my delimiter to none, expanding these columns. And then you can see I've got all the information coming straight from that API. So I can just close and apply this. Now, I would need to do some data cleaning, change variable types before I could start answering the problem statements that I've devised. But actually, we're at a really good place now because we've got live data coming in from some government database. You can see all of the data in the report. It's sat inside of query one, all the information, if it decides to load. And what I can do is actually, if I want to refresh this, I can just click refresh here and get a fresh copy of that data. Again, also, if I pushed it to the service, then I could set the refresh time to be, say, 15 minutes. And then I'm getting a fresh copy of that data every 15 minutes. So this is the kind of thing that we all need to move towards working, using things like APIs, storing and publishing these reports in the cloud. It will make our data analytics much easier to maintain, much more up to date, and ultimately much more powerful. Okay, back to my report. And actually, we can do a very similar thing with construction news as well. So this is a website that hosts different information about contractors and how many jobs they've won or lost or etc. I know there's not that many construction people, so I won't go into too much detail. And we can easily use that web connector as well for pulling down those tables. And then we've got, again, we're using the internet then as a bit like a database. So we can publish that report to the service, and then every time we refresh it, we're getting a fresh copy of those tables. So Power Apps. Now this is a service for creating business apps across platforms. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Power Apps, but it uses kind of a low code environment. There is some coding, and it's very easy to connect to different data sources, not necessarily just within Microsoft as well. So you can easily connect to things like Google or Dropbox, etc. as well. You can build really powerful apps. So I've got an example app on my screen of something we did with some of our learners. So building an app to scan QR codes on, say, a construction site, and then the people on site can fill this in and say, actually, you know, the state of this room is that it's 50% complete, or it's going to be late, or we've actually managed to start it early, and then this can be directly related back to the schedule as well. So it saves all of that kind of to and fro information where the schedule is never quite representative of what's on site. And this was constructed within just a few hours, working with some of our learners. It's such a powerful tool. There are some competitors out there, but Power Apps, again, in a similar way that Power BI is, they're really kind of dominating the market. And I've got a nice example that sort of McAlpine have been using in terms of their prioritization tool. So they have a big backlog of development ideas that they've got. They're very invested in project data analytics. They've been at every single hackathon we've had, so they've been to all 9 so far. And they wanted a mechanism for prioritizing which internal project they work on. And they built in conjunction with us this what they're calling the prioritization tool. So it uses things like Power Automate, which we'll touch on later, Planner, and Power Apps as well. But I've got a video of it working in progress. So you head to the voting pool and you're a member of the core team here. You've got all of the different internal projects that are being proposed, and you've got the ability to go and score them. So you can score them with things like usefulness of data in the data hub, output clarity, ease of development, business team priority, associated cost. And then once you've done that, you submit your ratings. It removes that development idea from the gallery there. So I've only left with one now. So it's quite a satisfying app to use, which makes a big difference to the end users. Again, you fill in all of these scores for this selected user story, submit your ratings, and it tells you there's no more use cases for you to review. Now we're just going to change user now. We're going to change over to a senior exec member of the team. And we're going to reload the app quickly. So it now pushes that those scores to senior exec members. So initially rated by the core team, now rated by the exec level teams. And the scoring's different. So they have 100 points to allocate. So popping 10 in there tells me I have 90 left. So I'm going to put 20 in there. Again, I can allocate these exactly as I want to against all of these different use cases. When I've allocated all of the points, it pops up with a button in the right hand corner, excuse me, and you could submit those scores. And then it tells you there's no more use cases for you to review. So that's just one of the, again, that is a bit of a stack of technology. Like I said, it's using things like Power Automate and Power Apps and Planner as well to actually manage the development of those different tasks. So Power Automate. Now this is a cloud-based service that lets users create and automate processes and actions. It's really useful for using for kind of collecting data, getting notifications, sending notification, processing emails, saving attachments, that type of task. And something that we're working on at the moment in the company. This is in development, but is actually in production as well. Is we're developing a system for HR to issue contracts to new members of the team and new learners that we onboard as well. So it's a combination. Again, it's a bit of a stack of Power Apps, Logic Apps, which is actually ultimately the same. Just imagine it's the same as Power Automate for the purpose of this presentation, and then SQL Server as well, our database. So you can see in the bottom left hand corner is our Power App that we've created. So this is for the teams. This is for the members of our HR team. They don't want to be triggering a Logic App or Power Automate flow by logging into Azure. They just want a simple app where they can log in, fill in some information potentially, and then issue the contract. So they literally press that issue the contract button, and then the process sets off. Information's already been collected from the employee or from the new learner or delegate for using a Microsoft form, and it takes all that information and compiles it in a very particular way and actually generates and issues a contract. It also goes to and from our database where we store information on the learners as well, calculates all the information it needs from the raw data, and actually produces, I say physical documents. It produces electronic documents that are issued to the employee or to the learner, and saves a massive amount of time. So the HR manager is spending about half an hour for each contract copying and pasting documents. Whenever someone is copying and pasting, there's always an opportunity for automation. Obviously, you have to bear in mind you need to go through a rigorous prioritization, I guess, regime, which is exactly what Stroud and McAlpine are doing with their prioritization tool. But this was an incredibly worthwhile project for the company. We've got lots of development opportunities with it as well. Another example of automation that we worked on with Kia was their BIM model federation. Now they were spending, I've got some statistics at the end of the demo where they were spending, I think 150 hours per project federating their BIM models. And those handful of people that are from BIM today will know exactly what I'm talking about. So this is a 71-step process, and outline some of those steps now. So they had to log into BIM Extra using two-factor authentication, which immediately was a difficulty for automation, but we managed to get around it. Download all the updated models, only the ones that have been updated, to speed up the whole process. Extract them because it downloads them as zip files. It had to actually extract them to two different locations, an archiving location and a live location. Open the live SMC file in Celebri. Hopefully this means something to the BIM people on the call. Save the archive, save the SMC file to the archive and live folder, and then send an email to the team saying that all the models have been updated and they're federated. Like I said, this was taking here about 150 hours a year per project, and it was quite a complicated system, working with three different. I'm just getting a bit of feedback again from someone, if you wouldn't mind muting. And obviously, it's really, really important. As soon as a model is updated, you'd want the team to be working with the correctly federated version of that model as soon as they possibly can. So this was not using Power Automate. This was using UiPath Studio. So this was desktop automation. So this automation here, the example you're seeing, is done locally. So you can see it logging into BIM Extra using that two-factor authentication, navigating through BIM Extra, finding to the correct aspect of that third-party system, looking for those updated models. It downloads the zip file, extracts it to two different locations. All of these locations were all of this text is all being all dynamically created. And then you can see it opens up Celebri and opens up the current file, saves it, which I think is the actual federation process. This can take a huge amount of time. It's obviously sped up for this demonstration, but this was taking sort of anywhere between an hour and 2 hours. I'm just getting a nasty bit of feedback from someone. If you wouldn't mind just making sure you're muted, that would be very much appreciated. Can't see who's making the sound. I don't know if you can see them, Sophie. Maybe mute them for me. That'd be great. Thank you.
I can't see anyone. I'm not sure.
Okay, don't worry. So that was a very, very worthwhile process for Kia to automate, just because of the sheer amount of time they were spending federating those models. And I wanted to talk a little bit about a stack. So I've mentioned some of these things in isolation, and I keep alluding to the fact that there is a technology stack that sits behind it. So I wanted to talk about a project with Osborne, where they use Python, Power BI, Power Apps, and Power Automate all in conjunction. So don't concentrate on this diagram for the moment, because this will confuse you, but let me just give you a bit of background into what Osborne were doing. So when they had made an order, so this is Osborne, the construction company, when they had made an order for items to turn up on site, when that truck actually turned up, they had to drag someone away from what they were doing on site. They stick a laptop in front of them and they get them to make notes on all the things that have been delivered. Now, this obviously caused a number of issues. There was a disparity between what they wrote down and actually what was on the truck. People were demotivated because they've been taken away from their jobs. And when it actually comes to the invoice needing to be paid, somebody in the office would have to ring back and say, what do you mean you've abbreviated this? Or there would obviously be a lot of disparity, and it just wasn't a great system. So we worked with Osborne to develop a more efficient system, and it actually transpired that when a web order is made, there's an order confirmation, that was created. And this order confirmation had HTML embedded in it, so we could use Power Automate, and we developed a flow to actually pick up that order confirmation, pass it to an Azure function, which is like a Docker container for running Python in the cloud. Just think Python in the cloud. Could pick up that HTML document. We applied a couple of Python modules to it, like Beautiful Soup, and we could actually pass that document using the Azure function, turn it into structured data, and then we pumped that into a SharePoint list and eventually a database where they could build an app for it, which is the picture you can see, the Osborne delivery tracker, and also they could do some reporting and analytics on and start to solve problems that were of interest to them as well. And I've got a demo of that app working in the browser here, but of course you have it on like a tablet or something on site. So we're logging in here with the admin username and password. We select the site that we're sat on. You select the vendor of the truck that I guess that's sat in front of you. This is all real information, by the way. You might want to select the delivery note because there might be multiple deliveries from that vendor. And you could just say, yes, the dinner knife's there. Yes, the milk is there. Yes, the bag of sugar is there. But maybe you want to put a comment and say, you know, the bag of sugar was ripped open, or whatever it might be, so that they could actually, the officer could raise that again. You can add in new items if something there was not in the gallery in the app, and you could also add in delivery if something's gone wrong with some of the automation process we already discussed. And this meant that because the invoice were directly correlated with the data that they were collecting on site, it meant it was a breeze for them to actually pay those invoices at that point. Okay, so I'm going to jump back to Menti to find it. Stuck on the API developer page. But yeah, there's still quite a few people in the call. Over 70 people in the call. I'm sure that some people have had to disappear because 2 hours is a long period of time. So please pick up your phone again and engage with this. It will be very much appreciated. So what do you think greatness looks like in your company? You know, how, if something happened and for you to say that the company's been successful in project data analytics, what would that have to be? And whilst everyone types diligently, I'm going to have a glass of water. Efficient handling of data. Absolutely. Simple, effective reporting. Yeah, that would be great. Something that works efficiently. Yes. Access to all tools. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about that a lot already around IT departments and governance, etc. Open collaboration, collaborative reporting, automatic handling of data. Yeah, it's very important. Sharing data across the industry. That's very, very close to our hearts of protecting success. Using PDA to drive our ambitious climate and carbon projects, streamlining processes as well. Yes, absolutely. Easy to understand. It looks like someone had caps lock on at the same time. Thank you so much for contributing to that. 26 people. Please keep your comments coming as well. We will look at them in much more detail. So do you view project data analytics as an opportunity or a threat? Now, I know I've kind of I've been walking the line a little bit this afternoon, but have I managed to convince you it's an opportunity? So 12 people have responded, 15 people, 17 people. On the call, we've got nearly 80 people. Only 22 people responded so far, so please reach for your phones. I'd very much appreciate it. Code is still at the top of the screen. That's great. 100% of people thinking it's an opportunity, which is, I'm glad it's so positive. And how could project data analytics improve your job or career? New skills to offer, absolutely. More opportunities, more respect for your role, more opportunities again. Improving future project planning and management, absolutely. Guidance, ensuring people remain current. Enabling and supporting innovation. A clear path for development, continuous development, absolutely. Opportunity to develop new skills, new capabilities and insights. Oh, it's disappeared. No, definitely, that's great. Thank you very much. And how do you feel like you could deploy project data analytics in your role? So more than 50% of your role, between 20 and 50% of your role, between 5 and 20% of your role. Are you on the fringe, or do you think it's not applicable? Very interesting, just giving it a few seconds to stabilize. 21 people, 22 people engage with this. So of the 3 categories that provide percentages, the lowest one is between 5 and 20%. There's a third of people here thinking more than 50% of their role, and 41% of people between 20 and 50%, which is, if that doesn't tell us we should be doing it more, then I don't know what does. Really interesting. Almost 30%. Sorry, almost 30 people responding to that. So thank you very much. Okay. So hopefully I haven't spoiled my last slide there. And I'm going to move on and talk about that it's not all just about the tech. So this is, again, really important, picks up on what I was saying earlier about not just picking up data and trying to understand exactly what the problem is. So data analytics isn't equivalent to one of these ink block tests. You mustn't just stare at this and think, is it Spider-Man? Is it the guy from Crash Bandicoot? Whatever it is, and try and solve something. That's exactly what people do with data. You've got to start with the problem, collect the data you want, and then use that data to solve that problem. Don't start with the data that's easy to collect that you already have, because you will never ever see a step change in innovation. And I think that is such an important message that I really, really want to get across clearly. And there are lots of challenges as well. So when we talked about the Gartner analytic value escalator, we mentioned a few of them, but data being misaligned for the problems you're trying to solve has got to be one of the biggest ones. Legacy data, so lots and lots of digitized forms that are difficult to use. Siloed and unconnected data, that's where we start using data pipelines and the cloud in order to pull these bits of information together. Data quality can be a huge issue, so difficult to show benefit if you've got poor data quality. Insufficient data volumes, it might be that you have a problem and it's going to take 2 or 3 years in order to collect enough data, and you need to get buy-in in order in order for that business case to be approved. It might need you might need company data, or you might need supply chain data, whichever way around it is, and it may be difficult to get. You might have a lack of data model and design. The company might not be mature enough to have that kind of roadmap in order to build that sort of data model. You might have problems around ownership. Who owns the data? If it's coming from one of your subcontractors, are you allowed to use it? Trustworthiness in the data is so important. And as soon as you lose it, it's very difficult to get back. So if you've got poor quality data and you end up with someone very senior losing trust in the data, then you're going to have a mountain to climb in order to get them to trust it again. Everyone's so busy running around firefighting that people haven't got time for this stuff. They're too busy you know, worrying about milestones, etc. And no high level buy-in as well. So people that maybe sat up the top of the business don't see the benefit in data analytics. Some people really don't think that data is the, you know, is going to provide a step change to this kind of thing. How do you overcome that kind of barrier? And in order to fix a lot of things, you need a strategy. You know, you need to create what we call in the business an as is and to be models. So what is the current architecture, data pipelines, etc. Can you write it down in a flow diagram or in a PowerPoint slide? And you know, what do you want? What is your target operating model? What's your to be state? Can you define that end goal? And what's the roadmap to get from A to B? What do you need to go through? Do you need to get funding? What sponsors and champions do you need on side? Without these incredibly resilient people, these things just won't happen in the company. The companies that I've seen that are making, you know, big strides in the right directions have these champions, and they are the most resilient people, and they just keep going, keep pushing these things along. You need to make sure you have the right governance in place. Governance is obviously required, but can also suffocate innovation as well. So you have to make sure you get the right balance. You've got to make sure you've got the right skills and know-how in the business. Are you going to employ people? But that can be very expensive. Are you going to upskill the people that already know your business? Have you got the right tools and architecture in place as well? So I guess, yeah, a bit of advice. Don't jump straight in and start creating dashboards. Project data analytics is a lot bigger than that. Start with questions, think about data quality and volumes, develop, you know, robust data pipelines that aren't always falling over. Use automation to remove humans from doing laborious tasks as multiple benefits. Correlation doesn't always equal causality. Just think about symptom and cause analysis. Understand the range of capabilities available to you and how you might be able to deploy them. And influencing people is huge. You need to go out and find those sponsors or champions or create them. You need to enroll them onto the bus and really make sure you can sell the vision. So creating a viable plan that's got that to be and as is operating states. You need to create really compelling arguments for change, probably relate it back to money wherever you can. You need to make sure it competes with other priorities. Everyone is too busy. Everyone's running around firefighting with their pants on their head. You need to make sure it is a priority for companies. And I've seen lots and lots of big companies, you know, their boards and their directors are really starting to get invested in this stuff now. You need to create an urgency for it. Probably get involved in communities like this, see what other companies are doing, and put that in front of people and make them think it is very urgent. You know, gain commitment, overcome objections. You need to be one of those very resilient people. Encourage others to collaborate and get people to trust the results. So important. So how do you start your journey? Now, I think I've broken down, I guess, engagement into sort of 3 different categories. You've got experimenting, you've got tactical and unsure, and I've got strategic and committed. Now, experimenting is great. It's on demand. It's great for casual learning. It can be outdated. You haven't got people to ask. And if you start writing stuff in YouTube comments, there's always a chance you're going to end up with some troll being nasty to you. Tactical but unsure develops confidence, which is great, but potentially you could spend effort elsewhere, and it can be really tough to stay motivated as well. And then you've got strategic and committed, very rounded, structured learning based around project delivery if you look in the right place. Practical with very you know, with high levels of support as well, but it's a significant time commitment. You need to make sure that you can afford to do that. And this is where kind of building on that sort of strategic and committed stage there. So we have our apprenticeship scheme. Like I said, lots of our learners were on the call, which is really great to see them all. It's a 15-month scheme. It's 95 or 100% funded by government. Depends if you're a levy paying organisation or not. Most organisations are. Delivered by experts is a little bit tongue in cheek because that is myself included, but also our CEO, our head of data science, and some of our senior data analysts. All of them are, they're working practitioners. They are all working in the consultancy side of the business, and they're dipping into the tutoring, so they're all on the top of their game. Our learner ages range from 19 all the way to 60, with the average, in brackets, mean age probably about 35, maybe slightly higher. We really think that it encourages people to be a pathfinder. It's allowing people to be that translator between those centralized teams. So we kind of tag this and label this as getting ready for an inevitable future. And we were actually Ofsted inspected 2 weeks ago, and we were in the top 7% of providers. We got significant progress, which is the highest possible outcome of that inspection. And we were really, creating the horsepower to seed and drive change. The next cohort is the end of July. Tuition actually starts right at the beginning of August. There is a bit.ly link in the slides. Think of this as free training to prepare yourself for the next 10 years. There's also an email address there, so please take note of that. vickie@projectingsuccess.co.uk if you want to get in touch. We are a BCS accredited training provider. So, project data analytics, is it a no-brainer? I'm going to head back to Menti for one last time, honestly, and just ask you a few more questions. So, a bit corny, but to what extent is project data analytics a no-brainer? So we've got 67% of people saying just drop down to 50-50. 100% agree, and there are strong supporters, which is really good. 22 people responded now. How many people have we got in the call? Still over 70 people. I think about 70 people, just over 70. So that's really positive. Nearly 60% of people saying they 100% agree. So I've definitely conveyed my message today. And how will you adapt to this disruption? Will you explore more structured programmings like the academy and the apprenticeship? I should have read the rest of the options before they disappeared. Attend meetups. Will you attend hacks, not necessarily our hacks? I fully recommend, if you're one of those people that's sat on the fence a bit, please come to the hacks, see what this is all about. Are you going to get involved in self-learn videos? So the highest percentage there is the academy. It's great. 10% of people coming to the hacks. That's really interesting. I think it's a shame people can't tick multiple options here. Hopefully people would want to do all four. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for that. And will you speak to organizations and try and enroll on the academy? Or maybe you're a line manager and you're thinking about your team, so you can also answer it from that perspective as well. Obviously, the academy involves lots of things, or all the things we mentioned today. So Power Apps, Power Automate, how to code in Python, how to run through all those examples we've talked about, how to load data into Power BI like we did, how to use Power Query and DAX, lots of theory, how to use databases, which we haven't really touched on, but I know you guys are all experts from the Menti. So lots of maybes, which is brilliant. 13% definitely in the next 2 months. Some of you it's not applicable, that's fine. I understand. So thank you so much for that. And hopefully your screen looks slightly different to mine here. So please put your email to register your interest. someone will be in touch with you. So if you want to drop your email in there, that would be very, very much appreciated. Okay, and with that, that is the end of my presentation. Here is my LinkedIn details. There's a QR code there if you want to just point your camera at that and you can add me on LinkedIn. Feel free to ask me any more questions about anything we've spoken about today or about the apprenticeship.